Welcome to Triggers and Spiritual Medicine, a community built and grassroots based podcast that addresses the root issues and triggers at the intersection of our health, systems of oppression, and cultural conditioning. Together, we explore what it is truly ailing us as human beings in today's world. This space is non commercialized, so no advertising dollars are involved because our mission is clear: to dive deep into our heart of our collective struggles and discover the spiritual medicine that can heal us personally, within our families, our communities, and our collective. Each week or each month, we sit down with extraordinary guests who share their wisdom and offer at least 3 actionable steps to help you on your journey. This is more than just a conversation. It's a call to action, a chance to tap into the healing tools we all need to move forward as a species. We explore root systems and causes through stories of healing and recovery from anything from addiction, cancer, chronic illness, domestic abuse, and more. We'll also learn from wisdom keepers, astrologers, medicine people, and lineage holders of sacred traditions, unraveling the mysteries that have survived a millennia and examining why in Western societies we are sicker than ever before. You'll hear stories from people who have used spiritual medicine in their healing journey, whether through meditation, Reiki, expressive arts, yoga, plants, or by unpacking religious indoctrination, persecution, or decolonizing mental constructs. If you believe in this mission, please consider subscribing and support our podcast by commenting, engaging, and sharing it with others. Again, it is through your engagement our visibility increases, since we do not have any grants or advertising dollars to support this podcast. You can also become a Patreon member to help support our domestic violence community and sacred activist work. Memberships start for free, or you can join for as little as $5 a month to gain insider information, exclusive content, and more. So whether you are a healer, seeker, or simply just curious, you're in the right place. So let's journey together. Hi, so I am so excited to bring you some really big medicine this month with my friend Ukumbwa Sauti, who was actually my first podcast guest when I first started this podcast. So if you want to go back and look at that, we talk a lot about sexual assault, men's work, and consent and why consent matters. So please definitely go back and check this out. But we're back again. For those who don't know his work, he is a beautiful human with a lot of wisdom focused around men's work and anti-patriarchy, conscious consent, anti-racism, and a Dagara elder in the spiritual communities of West Africa. And I just can't wait for you to explore his medicine, considering the week that we have had. This is being recorded the Friday after the inauguration. It will come out the first week in February. But we're all feeling a lot of the pings. And so, what better way to merge our medicine together to talk about how do we move, how do we address, how do we find the language, how do we talk hard truths and sit in it, right? All these different things in light of what is happening, right? And Ukumbwa, could you please just introduce yourself a little bit and what is kind of alive for you right now with everything that has been going on this week?
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate being here again. And yes, my name is Ukumbwa Sauti, and I really appreciate your introduction. Yeah, I'm really interested in doing more of this work around anti-patriarchy, men's work, as I like to call it. Many people call it that. particularly also doing anti-racism work, and I think consent culture comes around all of it. Some of I think about, you were mentioning the inauguration and the Trump regime, and consent is an issue. We say we live in this democracy, and we're talking about the United States of American settler colony here, just for the record. And when we really think about what consent is, and are we really gaining consent when we give our vote? Are we really gaining, are we giving our consent to certain things? You know, does the Electoral College kind of blot some of that out? I think there's a lot of questions, about the responsibilities and accountabilities of people voted into office, the consent that's happening, or seems to just be, it's actually railroading us. I think his name is Pete Hegseth, this really mediocre white man who's being entertained as being a Secretary of Defense, which I think there's 90 levels of stuff in that we could talk about, for a week. But yeah, what's coming up for me is, yeah, the issue of, and I don't know if metastasization or the concretization of these issues of racism and patriarchy and oppression. I know ableism figures into it, class issues, things like that. So I've been frustrated. I've been angry. I've been not in a state of disbelief, because all of this is not new. It's a fresh take on it, if you will. So I think the problems that we're seeing and the things that we're responding to, different populations are responding differently, because some of us, and particularly brown and black people, and particularly black women and indigenous people, are like, yep, saw this coming, and have been here before, maybe not personally, but our legacy, our heritage, our people, our ancestors have been through similar things, worse things. But so I think there's a lot going on right now that not only behooves us to be quiet and listen and be present, but to do that also for other populations who are more directly oppressed by some of these uh, oppressions and some of these efforts that the new president and other people are finding, a lot of them, being emboldened in right now. So I think there's, a dual kind of responsibility for us right now, is to check in, stay present, stay grounded, but also to say, yeah, something is really happening here. We might be feeling uncomfortable or in fear, but and I hate, well, there's things to do. There are definitely things to do. And I sometimes check myself on that, is because, men always say that, let's do something, let's do something. But I think this is one of those times, that we do need to do some things, and really be aware of what we're in. What is this ocean we're swimming in right now? What is the nature of the waves in the water?
Yeah, I know for me, for those who don't know who are listening,
Hmm.
being a multi-generational healer and intuitive, so in the spiritual communities, facilitating groups, circles, classes, all these different things, as well as being very active in almost 20 years in the domestic violence community. In the last legislative session, I testified on 11 bills in Massachusetts. So I learned a lot, even just in that process of, the law and, bills and what's padded and what's not, and all these different things. And, this week has been a lot to digest, because I know what women and children, for instance, the uphill battle we have faced for a long time. And I always say, when we add another layer and then another layer and another layer, it's like, when are we going to ever be able to stop and breathe? I know one of the triggering responses I personally had, as somebody who lives with complex PTSD, is I left my abuser in 2005, and I talk some about some of it in this book here, Secrets to Healing, and the other part in Feisty, where I talk about the incarceration story. But I couldn't understand why the day, and I didn't even know the results, but I woke up the day of the election results, and I couldn't get out of bed. And it wasn't until I acknowledged that for most of my life, I've been in almost all of my life since birth, I've been basically imbued in some form of abusive relationship.
Mhm.
That I finally became free on October for the first time in my 53 years. I think I did a TikTok on
Mhm.
this. My first time in 53 years, I became free on October 1st, 2024, only to feel like I'm back into a domestically violent, abusive, coercive, controlled with a Darvo narcissistic abuser for the first
Right,
time again on November 4th. That in my
right.
53 years, I was only free for 33 days.
Yeah, wow.
To only know what freedom feels like for 33 days out of 53 years was a big,
And
like,
yay for that.
whoa, whoa.
Yeah, and right on for that liberating moment, those 33 days. But yes, there's something really to engage. And I'm saying this in a large way, not your life personally, but I know you're engaging all of this. But there's something for us to look at what that means, what that story um, can motivate us toward. When we hear your story, or we hear other women's story, or we hear African and Black stories, and Indigenous stories, and POC stories, women's stories, queer stories, what this all means, not just for me or you and people I'm comfortable with, but people I don't know. When I talk about radical compassion, I always ask, okay, are we able to love people we don't know and have never met? Are we able to love them enough where we're going to live our lives so that we're not harming them? So yeah, to be able to listen to you tell this story about these 33 days, and then all of a sudden, on this day, this election day, or the next day, you're realizing that you're back in this situation, and on a bigger scale, in a way, but it's still very personal for you.
Yeah, and I think this is where what we're experiencing, because one of the things, and I'm hoping I'm saying this in a way that's received well, is it's not to negate other people's or indigenous and black voices, but to understand how do we unite the voices of this pain? Because my thing is, when we can honor, sit, and listen to the pain about others, like for instance, the other day when I heard about the Civil Rights Act being revoked, I was listening on even on TikTok to some of the Black voices, and I just started sobbing.
Mhm.
And I'm having the same reaction that I've been having in Massachusetts with victims of domestic violence on an increasing level not being able to be free. Like we think Massachusetts, we're a liberal
Mhm.
state, but we're really not. And we're really not. And it shows up in the family court system, and it shows up in the criminal justice system. And but it's like, how do we, in my mind, like I see what's happening regardless of color. I mean, obviously, it's worse for others depending on color, economic status. I get that. It's not to negate that. I'm just trying to make a broad statement
Absolutely.
of, what I see with victims of domestic violence and with what I see with racial injustice. It's like I see the same system of oppression harming two different demographics. Instead of saying, like, my trauma is worse than your trauma, how do we unite both voices for the same cause?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, and I appreciate all that. I think there's this necessity to not go into any of this with that idea of say the oppression Olympics or whatever, that kind of thing. But I think it is important to be able to be present for each other's story, and
Mm-hmm.
to understand that when someone has a story, you personally, or me personally, or someone else, or even a whole population, and I'll call it personally or communally, we have
Mhm.
to understand the deep rending of personhood that happens within that oppression. As I learned to say, how we get edited by the oppressor. And for men and for white people, how patriarchy and racism and white supremacy rends them, even, or me also as a man, in us being privileged by these oppressive systems. We run and
Right.
are complicit with them, but they destroy us too. We can have that story, we can get to that place, and we can have that conversation. And I think we're still struggling to listen to, quietly and humbly. I was just saying it to someone online yesterday and this morning and 2 days ago, same person. And what I kept repeating to him was, have you listened to any trans person in your life? Do trans people even trust you to tell you their story? Do you have any friends, and have you listened quietly and respectfully to that story? And I kind of was feeling that he hadn't. He may not have a trans friend, or if he has a trans friend, they haven't come out to him because they don't trust him. So my message to him was a larger message, to say, we say we are an ally or an accomplice or something like that, but have we actually taken in the pain of someone else's story? And yeah, for people that are directly affected by, bring it back to patriarchy, racism, and also ableism, and transphobia, homophobia. Those stories should be front and center, because
Yeah.
to hear that, you know leads us into the place of why we're going to do something in the first place, and to accept their leadership and to accept their wisdom with humility, and to say, well, yeah, and I was just counseling someone last night at 3 in the morning, that he had some ideas about patriarchy and things like that, and I suggested, I don't know, strongly, that it's like, well, let's listen to what women are saying about this first. This might be a cool idea, but we can't think we can even outstep,
Yeah.
women, and how they hold, their struggle against patriarchy, that kind of thing. So,
You're bringing in a
that
really
sounds like a
good
cool
point.
idea,
Yeah.
but are we listening? Yeah.
Absolutely. I guess, you know what, it's like I'm listening to you and you're bringing in such, so this is where like my brain kind of gets in the way sometimes, is because I'm listening to you and I'm like, because I love listening to people's stories, because, and then maybe that is where I see, and I'm like, that story may be like a different story, but it's the same patterns of oppression that I see, like in this culture and that culture and this, like in all these different demographics. And I guess that is where, and I'm glad you brought it back to the story, because for me, it's like, since I have been, and I have been doing it for decades,
Yeah.
of really wanting to learn people's stories and wanting to listen to their voices, and also understanding that not to take on their pain, but to listen to their pain, right? To
Mhm.
witness, to bear witness, right? And and do it without judgment,
Mhm.
you know,
Right.
and or biases, and or if you do have a bias that you see showing up, recognize it, acknowledge it, and say, okay, this is something I need to work on, right? These
Absolutely.
that has been my pattern. It's like when I went to Japan, there was an incident that happened, and there was one person, the Japanese elder was like, no, you really can't do that. And these white Americans were like, yeah, but we do it all the time.
Mm.
And they didn't hear the elder in their community, in their sacred space, say, no, you can't do that. And they're like, but we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And so, what I usually tell people, like my students and stuff, I say, the mistake isn't that they did it and then they were corrected. The mistake was when they were corrected, they go, yeah, but we're going to do it anyway. And
Right.
I said, so that is where we have to, because I think there's the other side where some people are so afraid. And I know I'm part of that demographic, that I am so afraid I'm going to make a mistake that sometimes I either don't say anything or it's kind of overdone in a way in a different way,
Hmm.
But,
Yeah.
because you're so afraid of making that mistake and you don't want to, perpetuate harm, because you are trying to
Right.
learn. But I think it's not the mistake that is made. It's when the mistake is corrected, you either double down on it or you go, oh, yes, thank you for highlighting this for me. Because I mean, I do this like in my one on one work when we go reflective, when we're trying to change traumatic thoughts and, patterns of behavior that are happening in the subconscious. You don't know what's showing up unless somebody goes, hey, you know what? It showed up here. Let's
Yeah.
redirect this, let's redefine this, and then
Yeah.
go in that direction, right?
Yeah, and that's also something I focus on in my one-on-one work with people, and also the communal work, is how are you feeling, what's going on in your body at a particular space. And yeah, there's a lot of people who say, yeah, I'm afraid of making a mistake and doing this and this. And one of the things that brings up for me, well, if you're afraid of making a mistake and feeling bad about it, thinking about it, what if you don't do a thing and you allow another group of people to be harmed by your inaction? So I say, yeah, we may
Great
need to
point.
step lightly, but keep stepping. you know
Yeah.
it's not even a matter of eggshells. It's like, yeah, we have to be aware of this space we're moving into. And let me tell you, I
Can you
always say
just
men
repeat
when
that
they're on.
again?
What's that? What I
Can you
say?
just repeat that again? Like, it's not about kind of quieting the voice, but it's when you step lightly by
Yeah.
not doing anything that it perpetuates harm. Like, we just reaffirm that action too.
Right.
Like,
Right,
reaffirm like
exactly.
that by the inaction, because if you don't, and people need to be reminded of that, like it takes courage. Your courage has to be stronger than your fear.
Absolutely. And for and I'll say, as for me as a man, a cishet man, or largely heterosexual man, having been raised within patriarchy, I need to be able to listen to women, and as I want to do things to dismantle patriarchy, I have to make sure that I'm continuing to do the work, hearing critique on how I'm moving or how I'm not moving and things like that, but to know that I have to be aware of the voices of women and queer folk and children and the earth herself, and all of this, so that I can move forward in a way that is in respect and solidarity with them, and then actual support and advocacy for them. But that I keep going. We can't take this and, oh my goodness, I feel bad, I might have said something wrong, oh my goodness, I'm gonna just hang back now. And it's like, oh, okay, so you let the attacker keep attacking. You're not gonna get in the way just because it's like, oh well, my feelings, stuff like that. And I've had a lot of yeah, time to really consider how people who have social privilege, either through their whiteness or their manhood, masculinity, and other things, able-bodiedness, um how we kind of stroke ourselves a little bit, and we're like, oh, okay, I got to take care, I got to make sure I'm doing this, and there's fires going on out there, you know there's blazes going on, and we're like, oh, but my feelings, and our feelings are important, but it's like, well, if your feelings are going to stop you, from going in and saving somebody from a fire, as opposed to you actually have the ability to do it, send somebody else, but don't walk away from the fire because it's like, oh, it's a little too hot for me. Somebody, and I'm not trying to
Well, it
say
goes
rope heroes
into
here. That's not the
I
point.
I but
You
I
know,
also would use the analogy of if it was your child that was in danger, would you be
absolutely,
still doing,
absolutely.
oh, I'm gonna coddle back and I'm just gonna like, I can't, it's too much for me. No, that mama bear or that father bear would be coming right out. So this is where I
Absolutely.
want to call that
Absolutely.
stuff out as bullshit, because under the right
Yeah.
circumstances,
Yeah.
you would not be behaving in that behavior, right? If somebody
Right. Right.
put a,
Exactly.
yeah, with the right circumstances, you would not
Oh, I get
be
it.
behaving that way, you know? So that goes to the next question I
And
have for
that's
you.
why,
Like,
yeah,
go ahead.
please.
Go ahead.
Nope. please ask the
So I was
question.
going to say, like this
We all have
week,
so
right?
much to
We've
say.
seen,
It's like, oh, what about this?
right? Right? I mean, obviously, like there's a lot of fears around like the spikes around racism and patriarchy, especially after the election, with even with racist emails and threats and slavery references, and even like now the for-profit prisons that are really starting to, speed up a little bit, or even like your body, my choice. Like what? That's a lot to digest. That in
Absolutely
itself
is.
in a week is a lot to digest. So
Absolutely is.
what are you, first of all, what are your thoughts around it? And then what do you feel is something folks can be doing is like I usually say stop, pause, breathe, and then what's the action step?
Right. Exactly.
Because you need to be able to calm the chitter chatter and all those triggers down enough so you can get clear to know, like, okay, maybe I'm not supposed to be on the front line, but maybe I need to be sending out emails, or maybe I need to be building a coalition, or maybe I need to be in the office of a coalition and helping behind the scenes, like whatever it is. Maybe I need to be in a soup kitchen. I don't know, like, you
Right.
know.
Right.
Um,
Right.
or helping, like there's an organization, they're always looking for people to help with phone banking. So it's like
Mhm.
whatever it is. So there's a lot to digest as far as that, between the racism, the prisons, the your body my choice, and it's there's so much there that's paralyzing people. So what are some of your concerns about what is rising, how it's rising, and then what do you feel people can do as an action step to help be part of the solution?
Right. 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 Thank you. Yeah, I think and I agree with you about that, stop and pause and breath and, then moving forward. I think what's really important is that we understand context, and history helps us to do that. We know there's a big problem with the educational system, and I mean that in the formal way and in the informal way. We educate each other through, or miseducate each other through social media, through conversations at churches and different things like that. We inform or misinform each other at the dinner table or wherever it is. So we have to think about what context are we actually in. And it's why I call the United States of America the United States of American settler colony, because I want people to remember that this is not just a place, the what did Reagan called it, the castle on the hill or something like that. um I don't even know, but that there's this exceptionalist idea about this country, an innocence that's afforded it when it has constantly, from the beginning to what will be its ending, have a foundation in oppression, in genocide of indigenous people, and theft of land, and enslavement of African people, in exploitation of labor, and in many other ways, to disempower people, to work on the dehumanization of people so they can amass power and energy and things like that. So I think it's really important for us to constantly being aware of where we are. I think of fish. I'm a water clan person. I think of fish. There's no time at any point where the fish goes, I'm just gonna hang out here and just, be in this little spot of sunshine. They are like always, hey, what's around me? Okay, I'm with the school of fish now. I'm relatively safe, so we're just gonna move. Oh, what's that? There was a shadow. I mean, and I don't mean that we need to be, like in this kind of nervous kind of state of being. And I'm not even saying they are, but what they are is aware. Even a tiny new fish is aware of their surroundings and is really honest and authentic about how they are in the world. And I think we as humans can be better at that. Many of us can be better at that, especially those of us who have been privileged by power, whether we create it or not. We're born into it. I was born into manhood. I'm a cis man, so I agree with the assignment at birth. And so, I've been educated and miseducated and inculcated by that. And I'm looking to shed that. So I have to understand that that's where we are. So I have to learn that certain things that are happening are patriarchy, they are racism, they are ableism, they are homophobia and transphobia, and we have to be honest about that. so many of us fight that because, again, we get our feels and I don't want to think I'm complicit with the system. You're complicit with the system. Being a
Well, can we
dang
just say,
fish, know that you're in
yeah,
this water. Be honest. That kind of thing. Have
yeah,
some integrity as a human. So that, I think, that's part of the breathing. Even that's part of the, oh, this just happened, what is it? Ah, that's what it is. And the more we get training and learning on that, the more we listen to marginalized voices, the more, and that we learn to trust them, which is part of the work that I, try to do with people, try to help them understand how we're relating to these systems of oppression, whether we're the target of it or the agent of it.
well,
However, we don't mean to be the agent of it. And some of us absolutely mean to be the agent of it. The Trump
yes.
regime is saying it's okay to be the agent of this. It's okay to have racist and patriarchal ableist power, and let's just move forward. It's okay to deny, trans people their humanity, and let's just go forward with it. So we have to be able to be honest about that. That's what's happening, and then gird our loins to say, well, this is what I can and will do, and I have to and must do something if I care about humanity and I have even a semblance of radical compassion for people I don't know and for people I do know who are depending on me to be at their side or their back, you know?
Yeah, two things come to mind as I'm listening to you is one, most of the rhetoric I am hearing from people that, they claim they want one thing and then they go, yeah, but, like it goes to like, yeah, but, right? Yeah, yeah, but,
Mhm,
yeah, but, yeah, but, right?
mhm.
I want clean water and I want, the earth to be saved and I want the money out of big pharma. And then, but yeah, but I'm gonna like negate all this other stuff over here. Not understanding that, like, one that comes to mind is listening to the international community. I'm very fortunate. I have teachers, friends, and family that are in multiple countries, and listening to the voices and the media from international. And
Yeah.
the biggest thing that really kind of going to that is like when TikTok went down, right? Or did it go down? It
Mhm.
went down to whatever to change their algorithms, right?
Yeah,
So,
they absolutely did that. Mhm,
yeah. So let's just
mhm,
call the kettle for what it is. But anyway,
yep.
I'm listening to a lot of people talking about Red Note. And what I'm finding very interesting, because I have mixed feelings about Red Note, and I don't want to go into like a whole conversation about it, but it really kind of
Mhm,
goes into like, yeah, into that story of the small story of listening to the individual people. But then when it comes to the narrative of like the government trying to tell the story, it really needs to be, you need to be the eagle to see the bigger picture. You need to be the eagle to fly above the storm to see the bigger picture. Because
right.
the narrative that we are spinning about China and what people who are on Red Note and they're going, oh my God, I'm learning about this in Chinese culture. I didn't even know it exists. This is what our government's telling us, and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, this is so amazing. How come we didn't know this? Like, and then it goes
Right.
back to like even the narrative of like how we used to frame Japan after World War II is like we even the one of the classes of ethnic groups that nobody talks about that was enslaved at one point because they
Right.
took away their property, took away their businesses, stole their property, put them into a
Mhm,
concentration camp, and they never got their property back for no other reason than the fact that they were Japanese American. Okay? Many of
right.
them born here in the US. And the narrative that was spread
Absolutely.
about that, about the Japanese and what they did to Pearl Harbor and how horrible this is. And I'm not negating that that was a horrible event. But when we hear on the other side, the historians from other
Mhm,
countries of that event, and to hear that as part of the peace treaty agreement in 1952, Japan had to, from my understanding, subscribe to big pharma and Western medicine as part of the agreement. Like, so this is
but I
where,
did know
like,
that.
you go, oh, but I thought it was about Pearl Harbor. I thought it was about ending the war. No. So this goes to show you how, like, all these little things get slippery sloped. And I think, again, listening to these stories, meaning the individual stories, but also the collective stories from outside the
Absolutely.
US,
Absolutely.
right? You know, a
Right.
perfect example of that is what was spinning around Gaza, right? And I, you know, my heart ached because I came from, maybe it was my trauma bonding to the other mothers losing their children, and then
Hmm.
fighting to try to, how do I
Still
save my
happens.
child? How do I protect my child when I'm kind of stuck in this cage and I can't get out? I mean, I had a different cage than what they have, obviously, but the idea and
Hmm.
concept of a cage for 17 years
Hmm.
was very real. I had a lot more freedoms than they did. And I'm not negating that, but I'm just saying, like, I could understand and I could empathize with all that. So then it comes into, like, my mind, what I've always been taught is the sacred activism. You can be very well practiced in your spiritual beliefs, whether a formalized religion or in, and a perfect example was the bishop the other day, you know, and her asking for mercy for all those things and having the big, brave courage to be able to speak. Isn't that like the epitome, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, religious creed, of what she was able to do at the pulpit on a national platform and to say what she was able to say?
Yeah, for sure. I really give her credit on that. All the while, I look at her whiteness and that she
Mm-hmm.
used it to say these things. And I would even say, even though the presence of Christianity on Turtle Island has to be looked at very clearly and to be understood how it relates to manifest destiny and the doctrine of discovery, she used that moment still within that context of that she's privileged by that. There's a reason why, and I can think of 10 names of indigenous practitioners why they were not in that space at the time, or a Dagra elder was not asked to be in that space at that time, that kind of thing. I get that, and I so appreciate that she said what she said. Part of me was like, oh, I wish you hadn't just asked for mercy. I wish you had lit a fire in his rear end, gluteus maximus. But I think she did anyway. I think she burned him. She just burned him. I'll just say that. Bam. She came with it. And yeah, I could talk for a day about how I would like to have been different, but I appreciate that she did it. I
Yeah.
appreciate that she said what she said, and the cameras were rolling, and they're all like, "Wait a minute, what's happening? She's not being a nice complicit woman right now. What is she doing? How dare she? She probably even likes the gays." I know that was going through their brains. So I appreciate that she said what she said and how she said it. That's important, and it's indicative of the steps we need to take when we have some kind of power and privilege. Again, whether that be men, white people, able-bodied people, straight people, we need to be able to advocate and be in solidarity with people who are targeted by the systems we benefit from. So I
Yeah, I
think she was
think,
a great model of that.
yeah, I was going to say, for me as a
Hmm.
white woman, um, I saw it as an opportunity to learn how to speak truth to power in a way that you can't,
Hmm.
in a way that you can't really be criticized. Like, even though she was criticized, but like, you can't, there's nothing that was said that was inappropriate, right? So,
Right,
you know, and
right.
her demeanor wasn't inappropriate. Her mannerisms weren't inappropriate. Her dress wasn't inappropriate. Like, so it was so it's like there's nothing you can really, so like for me, I'm looking at, like, how can I up the way I speak, the way I present myself, in a way to speak truth to power, right? um where I have that level of conviction,
Mhm. Right.
right?
And it also brings up for me, and I'm a water clan person driven by ancestral fire. If she had been throwing Bibles and spitting holy water at him, I'd have been right on. I still hear you. I still get
Yes.
it. And I hope you clunked him on the forehead when you, but
Yes, no, I get
no,
it, I
I
get it
would,
absolutely.
right? I mean, that's what I feel. And I'm not saying he would have lived to gotten, to get out of that church. They'd had Secret Service people all over her, and they'd have burnt down her church and all this other kind of stuff. I'm not saying that there's not repercussions to that, but I'm also saying that I would also be on her side if she did that. We're all giving, Luigi his props, but would we give, if that had been Louise, would we still be in the same place? If that had been Louisa, would we still be giving them the same
Oh,
props
no,
if they put a bullet
absolutely not.
in
As a matter of
dude's whatever head?
fact,
I don't know.
one of the
Right?
things
Just
that I'm,
saying that.
yeah, because one of the things that comes to mind is she's very representative of every Christian and every church, right? Because of what has happened with the church, right? And the counterpart of what is also happening that is unspoken is also the level of threats, vandalism, and burning of black churches as well, which is happening all over again. So if
Absolutely.
she would have gone to that next level, they wouldn't have taken it on her because she is white. They would have gone after the black Episcopal churches, the black Unitarian, the black
Very
Baptist
likely.
churches, and
Very
that
likely.
would have been that would have been the issue. I mean, considering
Yeah.
what we're seeing with another case down in North Carolina of the one pastor who opened up a church who was a convicted sex offender, and he went around and then I still think he murdered his wife. I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to say his name, but if you're following that case, you'll know who I'm talking about. Her,
There you go.
Micah, and how he opened up another church because he was able to buy off all the cops, and she ended up dead. She even put a video saying, "If I end up dead, you'll know why." And so killed me, and that's why I'm not saying his name, so he can't come after me. So
Yeah,
you
right, right.
know,
And
but the
and
the
that's
bottom
the
line is
world
like
we
this
live
is
in.
the issue. Exactly.
Yeah, and that's a predator prey relationship. And just like you said earlier, that the man that got voted in to be the president, which many people say is the most powerful person in the world, whatever. I kind of disagree, but um that they got in there and they are threatening people, and we already know he's a rapist and a racist. We already know that, and still got to that place because he's groomed more than half of the society, grooming the international community because he's allying with other rapists and racists and horrible oppression, oppressors, cozying up to some of the folks that were like, wow, really? Okay, you're gonna make friends with them. um and I think there's deeper nuances to all that, but I think we have to acknowledge that we're in that relationship, as you say, how you felt after those 33 days. We have to know that that's what's happening. We have to know that that's what's happening to our loved ones, and to some of the ones that may not say anything to us. It may be in them, the fears and the harm is again that they've experienced, the trauma that they've experienced is lit up again. This is something that's hard for men to understand. Like when somebody like Pete Hegseth gets to the point where he is a point where he's going to be given more power, yes, the stories are going to come up for people who have been affected by him. Yes, when someone gets to a certain point in power, and we see people have been harmed by them, yes, those stories are going to come out
Yeah.
precisely then, because
And
at
can we?
that point it's like, I
Yeah.
have no choice but to say it, because he's
Right.
now going to be able to have power over so many more. I can't hold it back.
And
We
this
have
is
to
where I think,
understand. Yeah,
yeah, I was gonna say, I think
please.
this is where we have to also address um, the non-disclosure agreements because in his second divorce, when he abused or raped his second wife or whatever it was, she is not allowed to say a negative thing or she will lose everything.
Right,
So like you can't even prove that he did domestic violence because she is muzzled from even saying so.
right. But
And
the other
that is the
stories that are
biggest
coming
problem.
out,
Yeah.
yeah, it is a
But
problem.
it
And
is a
what do they say?
problem when
Yeah,
the rape community.
non-disparagement agreement.
Yeah.
And when woman on the news, I think it was Rachel Maddow, she said non-disparagement. I said, oh, you made a mistake, which was funny because it's her business to talk, but I said, no, you mean non, disclosure. And I was like, oh, shoot, non-disparagement is a thing. You can actually be in a place where you can't say anything bad about me. So let me tell you, that sounds like you're guilty from the get-go.
Well,
And
that
I
goes
think
to show
people
you what
need to
happened to
be
Amber
able to
Heard too. I mean,
read.
that's what happened.
Right,
That's what happened to Amber Heard. That's what happened to Angelina
right,
Jolie.
right,
That's what happened to all of them, and it's the rape culture, right? And I mean,
right.
my friend was assaulted by a celebrity while
Oh,
they were here working on their concert tour, and I begged her not to sign when she finally settled. I said, regardless, I'd rather see you take less money as long as you have the freedom
yeah,
to not where you're not muzzled. So like if another case comes up and they need other witnesses, you're not banned from that, right?
right,
Or if something comes up because they did something quickly, like you're not banned from that. But these women are being forced to sign agreements, and I question the legality of it, especially when it involves
right.
other legal recourses. And I'm not saying, oh, you're going to go to write a book and you're going to go just slander them. That's different, but a gag order, I think that's what it's called, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
but yeah, she was forced to sign a gag order in order to get the money so he did settle with her, so it's an admission of guilt. But and I'm not going to go into
yeah.
details of who it is because I don't want to jeopardize her case as a third party
Right on.
whistleblower.
Understood.
But the bottom line is like that to me speaks to rape culture, right? But it goes
Absolutely.
into rape culture is beyond just the actual when it comes to sex. The rape culture is how we address the trees, the grass, the animals, the wildlife, the water,
Absolutely.
the resources, the corporate
Absolutely.
greed. That's rape
Yeah,
culture. And
yeah.
we're all groomed to side with the oppressor, not to the victims. Right now, it's like Trump is
Absolutely.
going in and saying this thing about, oh, I'm really going to be there for California, but we have to address this smelt thing, and the
Yeah.
fact that they stopped this waterways. That was not every person I talked to. I mean, that's a whole story for another time. But it was like that's not the
Absolutely.
issue.
No,
The issue
no.
wasn't the waterway. It was like no water was going to be able to put that fire out. It was too hot.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It dried up. It
Yeah,
dried up. It dried up the fire hydrants because it was too hot.
right,
And,
right.
and that to me should
Yeah.
be a scary thing of like that a fire can get that out of control and be that hot.
Mhm.
That it dries up any of the resources of water that you even would have to even try to put it out. Um,
Right.
so
And
it's good.
I was just gonna say, yeah, sorry. Uh, I hate doing that. And I do it. But
Oh, you're
what
fine.
it
It's
brings
all
up for
good.
me, what it brings up for me is, this issue of how modern society, how European colonialism has created modern ways of living in different places that are not meant to be lived in that way. That the indigenous people have done controlled burns. They've lived in places where they're able to steward the environment, be stewards in the environment, live with the environment, live with nature in a way like whether it's with the smelts and the salmon. Yay, the dams have been taken down so the salmon can flow again. That has ultimately all to do with the balance of not only the place but the region. And that's an issue that we have to look at, that capitalism doesn't want to say, because it's like, oh, we just need to put out a lot of fires, and we do need to put out a lot of fires in LA, but we can't say that the things that were set up beforehand, which have mostly been driven by indigenous people, to say, look, if we don't do this, the whole area is going to go to pot. It's like, I think in some documentaries I've seen, it's like, yeah, Las Vegas should never have happened. Why are we pumping water into a desert so that we can have, well, whatever, a system of, usury and exploitation, monetary exploitation, and golf courses over a place that should not have golf courses? Why are we doing that? Why are we living that way? Why did we put so many people to live in Los Angeles in the first place? What is that culture like? That's a rape culture. We're just gonna, exploit this area of the world so that certain of us can gain some benefit from it. And the other thing that comes up for me is, as you were talking, is the issue of law over ethics. There's plenty of legality that, like the legality of the gag order or of the non-disclosure or the non-disparagement agreement, um, is legal but not ethical. When we consider the work behind the civil rights movement was to change legalities into now more ethical law. So the ethics is what changed the law. Jim Crow was law. Slavery was law. The things that women could not do to have their own bank account or have land was law. Was it ethical? Was it moral? No, not by any stretch of the imagination, but by the stretch of the fantasy of male and white power that is backed up by bullets. And I always like to say that because that's what power is. It is backed up by bullets,
Absolutely.
and other tools. So we can't
Yeah.
dance around that. Oh, it's not just some, windy, poofy thing that we're saying, oh goodness, oh, you don't get paid as much money as a woman. No, that's backed by power and bullets. Yeah, you're not paying, women enough, and paying Black and Indigenous women even less.
I heard
So
speaking of that, is
um
like when I mentioned that video I watched with that gentleman talking about, he actually brought that up. He's
yeah,
like, that civil rights, he's like, do you realize if I go get a loan at the bank and I get
right,
rejected, or the white man will get accepted, that now I have to think about my children that are going to be impacted by that decision now. So it's a generational
right,
thing, like that, because I didn't have the
absolutely,
money to start this business. And now that
right,
business can't be transferred, or they can't even learn from that business because I was denied that bank loan because I was not white. and
right,
and that, like, this is why, like you said earlier, right, it's listening to the stories, right, and
right,
listening to the individual stories, not the propaganda. Propaganda is when the politicians get up there and make blanket statements, right, or people
mm-hmm,
make blanket statements. But when this is why, like, I am never shy about sharing my story, because I feel like whatever I went through was meant to be, like, nobody can tear that down, because when I go then share the cure or the argument, nobody can tear it down, because how are they going to debunk my story? Because I
right,
wasn't forced to sign a gag clause that says I can't talk about it.
right,
The judge did try, which is why I became free in
right,
October, where
yeah,
I had a threat of a 6 month prison sentence because of me talking about it, and I still said fuck you.
yeah,
I'm still going to talk
right,
about it, but I
right,
was just very
exactly,
careful in how I did. So I want to ask you,
mhm,
with all of this, and we can go and probably talk for hours about all these different things, and
I
I'm
know,
feeling like,
yeah.
you know, what are some of the things that people can do? What are some of the actionable steps people can do right here, right now, to create change? I know that we can't make the big change to make some of the smaller things. So, what are some of the things that people can do right here, right now, to be part of that change movement?
One thing more meta, more large scale, maybe philosophical, spiritual answer to that right off the bat. Whether we throw a pebble or a boulder into the pond, the ripples change the nature of that space. There is a cause and an effect. Both do it. Sometimes we want to be able to lift up a boulder and change things right off the bat, and boom, we've been felt, we've been heard, everyone's going to know about it. And I'm not saying just go to the pond and throw pebbles in, but what I'm saying is that no matter what our input, our contribution is, we have to value that, and we have to say, this is what I can do at this moment, but I can do this thing. So we have to be able to believe in ourselves enough, believe in our humanity, and realize that what oppression does is try to break down the humanity, and it does break down the humanity of everybody. It wants to do that. And the struggle against oppression is to find our full human expression, our full flowering, which is why I really identify with urban trees, that get like they've got a sidewalk on one side and the curb on the other side. And when they get uprooted, and they get uprooted because the roots can't fully root. Anyway, we have to be able to acknowledge ourselves and get to the fullness of our humanity. On a more practical and pragmatic sense, we have to be able to learn. We have to listen, just like we were talking before. We have to be able to look at history. We have to see how history is repeated in our present. Many times when I talk about a certain dynamic, I say it's historical and it's present. The doctrine of discovery is historical and present. Systemic racism is historical and it's present. It's still here. So knowing that, we have to learn, how are we situated within that? Are we an agent of this oppression, or are we a target of that oppression? What does that mean to be that? These are some of the things I want to have these conversations about, not obviously with individuals, but also more primarily, communities, organizations, and groups, to help them work through what that means. How does that mean? How do we then step forward with our confidence, with support, with allyship, with accomplices, or not? Because sometimes we just don't need to do that. There's many spaces where women are moving ahead and doing their thing, where I am just going to step back and say, well, I'll watch the door for you. And if you don't need me to do that, I'm out. I'll see you when you call me. Those kinds of things. How do we create relationality in a right way, so that we know we're all respected, or that we're trying to respect? Like, I'll project that I try to respect women in my work, and queer folk in my work, and I hope I'm doing that. I'm doing, yeah, I look for validation from time to time, just to make sure I'm on the right track, people who I'm accountable to, things like that. But we need to be able to take that input. So we need to be able to step forward, speak up, speak out, step up, step out, and help the people that are most affected by these things, listen to their stories. And that will help us understand how we need to organize, how we individually are situated within an organization when we get into an organization. And we should get into an organization, because people power is how it's happened, how it happens, and that's why I don't like to suggest that the United States of America president is the most powerful person in the world. No, look at all the people in the global south, the global majority. It's like, nope. Yeah, okay, it might take 6 billion people to be more powerful, but we are. We are, as human beings, we are as a
Yeah.
grouping of populations. So
They want
it's
us to
so important.
freeze. They want us to freeze.
Absolutely.
They want us to be
And have
isolated.
flight.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why there's the angry woman trope for Black women. It's like, oh, she raised her voice. Oh my goodness, she's going off. So we can't even listen to her. That's crazy. I can't say crazy. That's bullshit. That's unethical, and it's dehumanizing to say that Black women or others or Indigenous people can't have the full range of their emotions. And what keeps coming up in my mind again around Indigenous people is the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people, campaign that's been going on forever. The systemic nature of this, and how some of the things that
It's very targeted.
you know,
It's very
yeah,
targeted.
absolutely very targeted by the man camps. Man, if you don't know what a man camp is, Google it, or check out some of the things I've done before to talk about it, reach out and we'll talk about that kind of stuff. But how these things are systemic. So we need to look at it that way and deal with it, that it's systemic and that there's power behind it. Racism is just not just how I feel. I could call you a name, Laura, and that doesn't mean I'm being racist, because I have no power to do anything to you about that. I can't, stop you from getting a job, all those kinds of things. So we have to look at these things in a power analysis and be willing to address it as if that's the case, you know, and be smart about it, be intelligent about it, but also being in righteous compassion about how we're doing this work, and being able to listen and hold numerous energies at the same time and go forward in a way that says that we're being fully human in the effort to make sure everyone else can be fully human.
Yeah, you just bring up something that, again, something else I just watched. There was an undercover person that reached one of these kind of camps, so to speak, not a man's camp, but a different type of camp.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of supremacist camp in the UK.
Yeah.
And what they were able to get, and the media went out to tear, say, "Hey, do you have something to say about it?" And they go, "Well, everything that was recorded is misunderstood." And literally, what I heard that was recorded and videotaped secretly
Mhm.
was on the face, it's, "I am just a white man trying to earn a living, and I just care about everybody," right? And then behind the scenes is, we have to get these immigrants that are here in this country. We need to, if they don't leave voluntarily, we just need to slaughter all of them. And they literally were calling for mass murder.
Mhm.
And if we don't wake up to that fact, then we are doing the very things the German people did when the Nazis took over. We are doing the
Right.
same thing to our brothers and sisters, to our neighbors, to our coworkers that we have lunch with every day. We're doing it to those people we say we care about. And if you don't think you
Mhm.
are, some of you are married to immigrants, by the way. So it's like,
Mhm.
if
Mhm.
you don't think it's going to hit home, you're mistaken.
Yeah.
You are
Yeah.
absolutely, this is the biggest thing. Like, I remember having conversation with my dad because of the element of my dad being very like, and he didn't think he was like racist. He didn't think he was misogynistic. He didn't think he was a chauvinist.
I'll
And
bet.
how I would combat it with him to try to get him to see his ways is, I said,
Mhm.
if your granddaughter, you said, there's a reason why your granddaughter would never come to you saying she was raped. And he was like, "That's a horrible thing to say. Why would you say that?" I go, "Because all she would hear you say is women lie about rape." Right?
Absolutely.
Or this or that, right? And you're not connecting the dots of how it's affected the people that you claim to love. And it was
Absolutely.
my subtle way of saying to my dad, "This is why I never came to you 40 years ago and told you I was raped." I still never told him to the day he died. He had to, if he
Yeah.
knew about it, he knew about it because of me talking about it in places like this, but I could never
Yeah.
have that conversation with him for that
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
Know?
Yeah.
You couldn't have that conversation. So what I would do is I would try to get him to see it by, "You wouldn't be saying that," or he would make some sort of statement about immigrants and go, "Yeah, but you're talking about your grandchildren's grandparents,
Mhm.
or you're talking
Yeah.
about my partner who immigrated from Ireland, who at one point 30 years ago he wasn't undocumented. I mean, he's a
Mhm.
citizen now, but at one point he was undocumented."
Mhm.
You know? So you're talking about people that I care about that also you say you care about,
Mhm. Right.
So this is how I usually sometimes bring it about is I bring it home when people in the
Mhm.
family dynamics that start talking shit like that. I go, "Do you know you're talking about your wife like that? Do you know you're
Right.
talking about your daughter like that? Do you know
Right.
who that's who you're actually talking about?" Right? You
Right.
are aware of that, right? And then they go, "No, I'm not. No, I'm not." I go, "Well, yeah, you are, because that's who they are." Right?
Absolutely.
You
Right.
know, and I do think like sometimes it's a dance between knowing when to rest. I think is another tip too, is knowing when to break away from the TV, knowing when to kind of cocoon. But it's for the sole purpose of recharging your batteries. Like your batteries just
Right.
don't run all the time. They all
Mhm.
have to stop and recharge, right? Whether it's your
Right.
car, whether it's literally like the batteries in your cell phone, right?
Mhm.
Your cell phone just doesn't run all the time. It has to stop and be plugged in, right?
Mhm.
And so knowing when to stop so you can recharge, because you're also no good if you're running on empty. So
Right.
it's knowing that way, and you're more in your power when you do and you recharge and then you go back out and you go back into the action front. What are other some of the action steps that you think would be people should be doing tonight today that they can do today? Granted that they can't change the bigger scope, but what they can do
Mhm.
today, maybe in their communities.
Well, first of all, I think doing small changes does change the bigger scope. And
Hmm.
I think when you do the math, which is why I love the lives and the example of ants. It's like whatever. There's a billion or a million ants in a colony or something like that. They depend on every ant to do what the ant is there to do. So we can say, "Oh, let me kill that ant," and yeah, okay, we don't think the world stops turning because an ant gets killed, but it changes things. We have to understand that, yeah, our small um um inputs, when magnified by other people doing small things and big things, helps us to build the muscle of resistance, build the muscle of movement toward liberation and dismantling oppressions, so that we can possibly do bigger things. Some of us won't have the capacity for it, fine, but we have to learn and build those muscles and realize that we can do things. One of the things we can do, and whether we're on Instagram, or I don't know what Blue Sky is yet. I'm not on there yet. It might take me a day or two. I don't know. Or Facebook, follow groups that you wouldn't think you would follow if you're trying to stay comfortable. All right. Just click follow, and let the flow come in. See what's being said in these groups. In many ways, Facebook is showing me all these groups and things like that. I check it out and I'm horrified, actually horrified at the levels of racism, patriarchy, and xenophobia and transphobia, homophobia that I'm seeing in some of these groups. So yeah, I block them. So I understand, oh, okay, that's that cesspool. But there are other really great groups run by African people, Black people, women, and profiles like Feminist News. There's some really interesting things there. Any group that is public, that is run and moderated by people in groups who are privileged targets, we should be following them. We should be taking time, again, to hear those things. That's a small thing we can do and go, oh my goodness, I never knew that, you know and be open to that, be open to that learning, and then be willing to hear what they're asking for. When a child falls down, skins their knee, we're like, oh, well, hopefully, for a good parent or a friend, we're like, oh, you hurt your knee, so I'm going to get you a thing, and I'm going to attend to your knee, and I help you do this thing, and oh, can you walk? Okay. All this kind of stuff. We want to be really present with that, but we need to do that politically and culturally. We need to say, oh my goodness, African people are coming under these particular kinds of oppressions. Let me at least listen to what it is and say, oh my goodness, this is how I can help. This is how I can take care of the thing that I'm ensconced in, this privilege, this power, and how I can shake it at its core, or how I can snip away at it, cut away at it, like the water that cut through the stone to make the Grand Canyon. It may not, I may not get it done in a day, but if I keep persistent at it. And actually, one of my one-on-one clients said this word, this term, sustainable courage. And I hope he doesn't mind that I said this. I'm not going to name him. But I said, wow, that's powerful, that there needs to be a sustainable courage in all of us that says that, not just, oh, I feel bad, oh, George Floyd got killed, and look me, I got picket signs and I'm running around. Oh, now I need to go back and make my quinoa salad, and post nothing but my food for the rest of the pandemic. All right. That happened. All that happened. But what's the sustainable courage, and what's the sustainable awareness we can have so that we stay persistent, that we stay stepping up and stepping forward and stepping in, that we allow our discomfort to be less than our compassion, and our
Yeah,
desire to see people be free, and that we want to be free with them,
I
you
use
know.
this analogy when I work with people. This is the
Mm-hmm.
rock, this is the
Yeah.
water.
Yeah.
When we're trying to change our synapses and neurons in our brain, to change our patterning, our behaviors, our thinking, and I always say, here's the water crushing the boulders at the beach.
Yeah.
Who wins? Right?
Yeah.
And they go, well, kind of the water. And I go, really? Because over time, when you have
Mm-hmm.
all these storms, these mega storms,
Mm-hmm.
but it's with perseverance, all in the micros, the constant
Right.
doing this with the water,
Right.
eventually cracks the rock. And then when
Right.
that happens, it opens up the floodgates, right?
Right.
So um, it's creating those, and it reminds me of like when they threw my ass in jail to silence me, and I'll just say quickly, I was never accused of a crime, never charged with a crime,
Mm-hmm.
never arrested for a crime, and my right to a lawyer denied. And I served time in
Wow.
prison.
Wow.
And you don't think that would happen in Massachusetts. But back then, when it happened, I was gagged because at the time people looked at me with disgust. I could see the looks on people's faces. People backed away from me. It caused a lot of trying to rebuild my reputation, my name, all those things that was gutted because of the corrupt system.
Mhm.
And I hate to say it, with this asshole that's like elected again, it's because of him in the last presidency. When I speak about that happening and the corruption that led to me being incarcerated and why I was really incarcerated, the real reason, people were like, I'm not surprised. It's like, a complete flip of like I had to have done something to they're not surprised. So what I am hoping with this new administration is that it really opens people's eyes. And I want you to look at, like you brought up George Floyd. What if that was your son? What if that was your brother? What if that was your neighbor,
Mhm.
your son in law, whatever that is, your father?
Mhm.
Would
Mhm.
you still be thinking the same thoughts?
Right. Right.
With or without the addiction? Because I saw people using that, well, he was high on whatever. That's what really, like, does that even, okay, let's throw that in there. He was high as a
Right.
kite. He was a drug dealer. He was a so called low scum. Let's just give all these people what they're claiming to be, right?
Right.
Would you still sit there and have those same belief systems if that was your brother, your father, your son, any of that? And I
Right.
guarantee you, very few of you would.
Right. Right.
Very
Right.
few.
Exactly. Right.
So it's very convenient because it's not hitting home to you that you're going to put
Right.
all these judgments on somebody else. So I would say, as another tip too, from my perspective, is bring it home. When you see that person being arrested by ICE, when you see that person being judged or persecuted because of whatever it is, would you still be feeling the same way if it was your brother, your sister, your
Mhm.
aunt, your mother, your father, your child? And I'm talking about those that are being accused, not the Nazis that are going around hurting people and making death threats.
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
So I think we're talking about two different demographics. So it's because, I do see some of them as wounded children. Like I still look at Trump and I look at Elon Musk as wounded children, and the only
Right.
way they can garner love is through power. And
Right.
that brings me to a friend of mine who really even brought up like just because you were a victim of abuse doesn't give you the excuse to abuse others.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
it
And that
still
doesn't mean
requires personal responsibility for your actions.
absolutely. And that doesn't mean we need to let them continue to be, wielding that power in an unethical way and in an exploitative way. We don't let the child who doesn't understand just swing the bat around the house and harm the cat and everything like that. We need to have some, the child needs to learn accountability and how their actions affect other people and that they're harming people. And so that's a process of learning. But again, this is why I seek to do much more work with organizations around issues of anti-racism, anti-patriarchy, as a consultant and educator, to again help work through these things, to help to see how we've been dehumanizing other people through our own inculcation into these systems, or how we've been dehumanized as a target of these oppressive systems. Um and and how, when so many people say, oh, but I love everybody, everybody's my thing, no, because you don't see everybody as fully human, and you've been
Right,
trained not to do that because of the system you grew up in. You're just not willing to acknowledge it because now you think you're less of a human because you were brought up in whatever. But even if that's the case and you feel guilty or whatever, you still got to deal with that, unless you are comfortable at sitting back. And as some people have said, I kind of shared this with you before, I'm just going to hunker down these next 4 years and let it all pass. And what I say in the video that I still haven't finished is like, well, if you want to let these 4 years pass and just go by, you are inviting in a next 8 years of the same thing,
yeah,
because they're
considering they
prepping
just
somebody
filed a
right
bill.
now
Yeah,
to follow in his
yeah,
footsteps. Yep.
exactly. Well, they just well, no, no,
Absolutely. You're right. There's even that,
they just
that he gets
filed.
to have another
They
term,
just filed for another term in
right?
Congress to make it that he had can
Come
run for a
on.
third term.
Come
So this, yeah,
on.
setting. I'll just say the other. I guess maybe another tip is You can't sit
Yeah.
back because this is how Hitler grew his
Right.
power in Germany. It became
Right.
because of all the nice, loving German, amazing Germans that said I was going to wait it out too. I was just going to sit back because I don't have the stamina. I'm going to be the nice person. I'm not going to ruffle feathers. It's because they did that. He garnered the power he did.
Hmm.
So we can't afford this. This is affecting our children. And I'm old enough that I'm like, I don't care. I'll sit by myself on the front lines. I'll be a target. I'm old enough to say I've lived my life. I'm good. And I've already made peace with death. So I'm good.
Hmm.
But it affects my children and my
Right on.
grandchildren. So
Right on.
this and our great grandchildren. So
Hmm.
this, where we are in right now, whatever decisions we make today,
Hmm.
affects multiple generations moving forward. End,
Right.
stop, done,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
right? So, Kamba, if people wanted to work with you, whether individually or maybe they wanted to have you work with them, with their organization or group, what is the best way, or how can they find you to learn more about you or to reach out to you?
Mhm. Two things. I always send people to my email. It's my name at gmail.com. UKUMBWA at gmail.com. That's the way I ask people to get in touch with me. Also, I have a link tree that has, some of the services that I provide, some of the videos that I put out, things like that. So people get to see some of my perspectives, some of the testimonials of people I've worked with, whether that goes back to, education, things in education, higher education, or other kinds of programs, to, some of this work directly that I'm talking about right now. So people can see how I operate and what I've done, things like that. Some of the links in other media platforms, social media platform. But yeah, to look at the link tree, which is, link tree, there's a dot after the TR and the EE, and I can give this to you so you can put it in. But, after the slash, as we call it, is Ukumbwa Sauti Consultant Educator. All right. So link tree, um, Ukumbwa
We'll have that
Sauti
link in
Consultant
the
Educator.
description, by the way. So for everybody who's listening,
Sounds good.
it'll be
Yeah.
on
And I like
the
to say it
description below.
too. Yeah, and I like to say it too because sometimes folks can't see the screen,
That's
you
true.
know.
Thank you.
So I like to say it
Absolutely.
out loud, multiple levels of communication. So yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely thank you for that support. And yeah, I'm anxious to do more of this because I know that the need is high. And sometimes when the need is high, people lean back even further. They're like, "Oh, I can't handle it." I would love to be able to talk with people about how we can handle it and how we need to handle it. I'm not the only voice out here, but I'm one of the ones that wants to do this work with people, and I look forward to that.
And I'll tell you, anybody who wants to work with him, you'd be very blessed to have him on your side. He's very warm and compassionate. If you haven't seen that through this episode, his beautiful, warm demeanor and his grace that he has in how he addresses very difficult topics in such a beautiful way. He'd be very
Thank
It'd be a very good person to have as a part of your organization, to have as a consultant. And I will just add, stepping back is one thing just to catch your breath. Just don't stay there too long because it's when you stay there too long, then it becomes a problem. So it's making sure if like I said, my PTSD got triggered this week myself, but I'm here today. You wouldn't know it that I had a complete blowout yesterday. But what I did is I made sure and called in reinforcements. I upped my self-care. I did it so it didn't carry over into today. So like those episodes were shorter spanned. So it's knowing how to do that dance of self-care and action, care and action, because this isn't going to just affect us. You can't sleep your way and bury your head in and pretend it's all going to go away, or the other thing, somebody else will take care of it. I don't have to take responsibility. No, because that is why we have the issues we have, is because too many people are saying, I'm too busy, I gotta take Johnny to soccer, I gotta do this, somebody's gonna cook dinner, somebody's gonna do this. Screw that. Make dinner, have leftovers every fucking night so you can go out and be a part of the solution. Get into the
Absolutely.
communities. Start being a voice. Start listening to voices like
Abs-
Ukumbwa's.
abs-
You know, he has a TikTok. He has a Facebook page. We're talking about Facebook page. Following. We both
Mhm.
have Facebook pages. Healing Trauma Through Spirit is the one where I put a lot of this on there, right?
Mhm.
Instagram, TikTok, and all of that. So make sure you do follow these voices. Engage in their content. Even if you just put a smiley face, you're helping elevate the visibility and negate the algorithms for all the
Absolutely.
toxic content that is happening. People in the age of people saying they're going to get off these platforms because they're now very white supremacy. How you combat that is you help elevate content like ours that just again, just by putting a heart or putting something else, you're helping change or shift the algorithms because you're helping us gain visibility.
Absolutely.
My healing with trauma page, I noticed
Every
this
tool
morning
in the
because of
bag.
some of the things some of the things I noticed. I have the two pages. I have so much
Yep.
visibility on my healing with spirit page. I went on my healing trauma page. I literally woke up with zero visibility today, zero views on
Wow.
any of my content. And that ought to tell you something. So if you don't
Yeah.
actively go and elevate content like that, it's suppressing. Our voices are being suppressed
Mhm.
actively. So we need you on those platforms to help elevate those voices. That's another actionable step that you can do.
Absolutely.
Is you may
Something as
feel
simple as that.
powerless, right? You could feel powerless and not know what to do, but you can help elevate people like us that are actually doing things. I'm actually personally engaging in two legislative bills this year that just got
Mhm.
refiled. One is the moratorium on building a women's prison that just got
Mhm.
refiled, and the abusive litigation bill that just got refiled. Okay. I did hear there's another bill that I might be supporting that involves economic abuse with domestic violence, but I think it also bridges into elder abuse in a few other areas in marginalized communities. So that might be another bill once I get the details that I will be supporting. We can't do it without your support. So if you are feeling semi powerless and you feel like you don't have the stamina to go out into communities, make donations to our pages, help share our content, do all those things to help elevate our voices. That is something each and every one of you can do, especially in the
Absolutely.
age of Meta now suppressing our voices, which they always kind of have. They always,
Yeah.
I can't speak to black and brown folks in
Mhm.
social
Oh,
justice
yes.
because I'm not one of
Absolutely
them,
has been.
but I can speak
Absolutely has
to
been.
victims of domestic violence that they have, since the inception of Facebook, suppressed victims of domestic violence voices. In
Yep.
October, I had five posts removed for spam on my own page.
Wow.
Was the what they said I violated community guidelines with the threat of removing my own personal page when October was Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I was sharing my
Absolutely.
story
Right. And that's what
five times. Five.
systemic patriarchy looks like. And we have Mark Zuckerberg. Oops, sorry, Zuckerberg. Um,
Zucker.
saying, "Oh, I'm going to step into more masculinity. We need more masculinity." It's like, what are you talking about, man? You just want to now be out with your patriarchy. That's all. You just don't want to have any, guide guardrails or guidelines
Yeah.
on that. You
Coming
just
from a
want to
man, coming
blow it
from a
up.
man who stole the election, helped steal and rig the election back in 2016 with Cambridge Analytica. So, you know,
Absolutely.
we forget about
Absolutely.
that. We
Absolutely.
forget he was involved with
Right.
that.
And yeah, and we need to be able to see that, like we talked about earlier. We need to be able to notice it, call it for what it is, call it the name that it has, and then move against it as a negative, because that's what those things are. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I
And
so
bring in a new way of
appreciate you,
being
my
together.
friend, for
Thank you.
being
I
here,
likewise.
sharing this, and I hope this was some really difficult conversation, But I'm all about having and speaking these hard truths, because if we don't speak these hard
Same,
truths, we can't move through it. We can't move through it, then we
same.
remain stuck. And if we remain stuck,
Right.
that's exactly what these oppressive powers want. So we have to be
Right.
able to do this, and it's really important to really listen to folks that are actually doing it, not the big fluffy whitewashing pages that you're going to start seeing a lot of. Very,
Mm, mm.
yeah, fluffy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really important to know the difference. Okay, just because it looks nice and it's beautiful, but are they walking that talk, and how much time are they spending doing that and not in their craft?
Right. Right.
So, but we leave you with a lot of love and blessings. And until next time on Triggers and Spiritual Medicine, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share, do all those things. That's part of sacred activism. That's part of being part of the change. Be sure to elevate those that are doing this hard work, that are on the front lines. It's really, really important. Until
Yeah.
next time,
Absolutely.
have a great day. Bye bye, everybody. So, thank you for tuning into Triggers and Spiritual Medicine. We hope today's episode provided insights and action steps to support you on your personal journey. Remember, healing is a continuous process, and by addressing what triggers us, we create space for deeper transformation. If you would like to dive deeper into our community and support our sacred activist work, join us on Patreon, where you'll find more resources and insider content to empower your healing path. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. And please share, like, and engage with us too to help boost our algorithm status. Since this is a community-driven podcast, your support truly makes a difference in helping us reach more souls who can benefit from this journey. Stay connected, stay mindful, and keep doing that inner work. Together, we are building a community that uplifts and heals. So until next time, stay grounded and take care of your soul.